you.
Oh, there I am.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending this Place Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Bagnall, and we might as well go straight in to the agenda. So item 1 is declarations of interest. I'll take that as there's no declaration. I'll just check the chat. No, good. Item 2, urgent business.
No, Chairman, no.
Thank you very much. Apologies for absence.
Councillor Cox as exec member. I have none others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 4, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 12th of Feb. Can we, anyone move those as an accurate record?
Move them, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. Do we need a seconder?
Just get a seconder, please. Yeah.
Anybody?
Is there a seconder?
I'll second them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's okay, Chairman.
Thank you. And item 5 on the agenda, we're moving quite swiftly through this. We're now doing a presentation, which place response to COVID-19. We've got Director of Place Activities and then the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on place services. I would ask all members if you can save your questions till the end, but please type in the chat whether or not you want to speak, and I will make a separate list of that, and then I'll invite you to speak when the presentation's finished. Thank you very much. So I'll hand over to Jerry Brough for the first part of the presentation.
Can't hear you, Jerry.
Apologies, folks. Thank you, Chair. This presentation focuses on Director of Place during COVID and what we've been doing to address some of the issues that we've had to deal with. However, I thought that I would start by just refreshing everyone's memory as to what the Director of Place consists of, because there's been a few personal changes recently, and also to give you some idea of the scope and extent of our activities. So the first slide basically gives you the senior management structure, Director of Leadership Team, John Dyson as Deputy Director, Paul Whittingham as our Assistant Director for Development and Regeneration, Kelly Hopkins, Assistant Director for Neighbourhoods, Libraries and Communities, and John Kelly, our Assistant Director for Highways. Next slide, please. So as you can see from the previous slide, we've got 5 key areas of operations, and this gives you an idea of the breadth of these operations in terms of our neighbourhood and reg services team, our place-based services, our economic development, regeneration, highways, engineering and parking, and policy and public sector reform. You'll see from this slide that there is really not many areas of a resident's life in the boroughs that our services don't touch upon at some point in time, and some of them are very much valued services and ones that we've had to keep going during the COVID pandemic. So moving on to the next slide. Just to remind everyone of the revenue budget that within Place Directorate is in the order of £117 million. Our net budget is 35 million, which I haven't done the maths here, but gives you an indication that we generate about 64 to 65 million pounds worth of revenue from various sources, fees and charges, or from monies that we obtain and passport through into different services. For example, in our highways services, where we obtain money and that gets passport directly into the repair and maintenance of our highways. I thought it also useful to give you an oversight into the staff position and the resources position within the Directorate. we have 1,169 full-time equivalent staff. They are spread across the directorate, but as you can see from that, the main concentrations of staff are in neighbourhood services and community services in our in John Dyson's areas and our waste and fleet services. So much of the other activities in the directorate are significantly lower levels of staff, although quite a significant contingent in highways as well. In terms of budgetary spread, then the key main budgets are in waste and fleet management at 25 million, 12.7 million in our corporate property services, and again, if you added up the highways, it'd be a significant budget there as well. So I just thought it would be useful to give you a bit of a current status, if you like, in terms of the finances of the directorate. Next slide. The next two slides are basically a restatement of the objectives that are included within the Place Services Plan. We have a service plan which is published, it's online and available to the public as well as members, and this is just a restatement of these objectives, so I'm not going to go through them one by one, but you can see that these are directly related to the delivery of effective and sustainable services, and also to the development of strategies and policies that would help support our vision partners to drive sustainable growth within the borough. The next slide is the final 3 out of 7 of our place objectives. And as you can see there, it's about prioritised approach to asset management. We've been working for some time on that. There is a paper coming through Council to deliver a strategic asset management plan, and that's part to do with addressing that objective. Achieving sustainable inclusive economic growth, and through our employment skills support, and developing new opportunities for Bolton's cultural offer, mainly through our libraries and museum, and through some of the other offers around hospitality that we support in the town. Moving on to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on place services. I'm going to let John Dyson take over for this for the next couple of slides. He's going to take you through our waste and environmental services and how that's been affected by the COVID pandemic. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Jerry. Good evening, members. The kind of slides that I'm going to run through really just relate to community services, which includes waste and fleet management services, as Jerry has alluded to. It's not my intention to run into the detail of every single service, but we've just kind of selected, if you wish, some highlights in terms of those key services that we deliver into the community, services which have played their part during the COVID-19 pandemic, but also been impacted by the pandemic. So just to start off with waste collection services, obviously during the lockdown period particularly, this is a key service in terms of public health provision, and clearly we had many householders who were at home continuing to generate more significant volumes of waste through not being able to attend the workplace. So really essential that we made best efforts as a council, notwithstanding the challenges that we faced in terms of our own workforce, to continue to deliver those services, and you know, we did so to great effect, I think it would be fair to say, throughout that period. So probably key points I wanted to pick up was that we did continue to provide core household waste collection services, so residual waste, green garden waste services, lots of gardening activity obviously over the lockdown period, and our recycling and food waste services. We did have to respond to issues relative to staff absence within the service, particularly during the early weeks of lockdown and the pandemic. But in the main, we were able to continue to provide recycling services. In a number of cases, this did extend out to a 4-weekly frequency as opposed to a 2-weekly frequency, the usual 2-weekly frequency. However, full service resumed during the lockdown period and has continued in accordance with normal scheduled collections. One of the pleasing things, if you wish, was that the period of lockdown and the reduced frequency of collections that we provided at points during that period doesn't appear to have had a detrimental impact upon our recycling performance, which is great news for the borough. At the end of Q1, we are projecting our recycling performance was 52.6%. Clearly that reflects garden waste at this moment in time. So as we move through the year, the quarterly performance will obviously adjust upwards and downwards. But we are not expecting any significant detrimental impact upon our outturn position at the end of this year, which we would expect to be in the region of 43–44%. We did, of course, see an increase in the volume of residual waste, but offset, as I say, by extended recycling activities. The actual challenges associated with continuing to deliver services in accordance with COVID-19 guidance obviously had a number of implications in terms of how we deployed our resources, and we had to take decisions to reduce the number of colleagues who were based in our vehicles in terms of the cab itself. That's been a similar situation for other colleagues, and I'm sure they will touch on that later in this presentation. We are continuing to operate our services through socially distanced measures, but we are continuing to operate full services, and we have a continued dialogue with trade union colleagues in respect of the day-to-day deployment of resources and how that may change and be modified moving forward. We also provide, as you will be aware, a commercial or trade waste service. The service was stood down to some extent during the period, as you would imagine, with businesses closing. We obviously didn't have the same demand on the service, but again, we were able to work with those businesses, and whilst we saw, I think, a 40% reduction in the quantity of waste that we collected, the reality is that we only lost a very, very small proportion of our business. The vast majority of customers who weren't able to continue trading suspended their accounts with us, and obviously, normal services being gradually resuming over recent weeks. I think the other point I just wanted to pick up in relation to the waste collection service, the provision of household waste recycling centres in Bolton's case on Rakes Lane and Salford Road, again, continue to be an important community facility. Those centres, for obvious reasons, were also closed during the core period within the pandemic and the lockdown, but we work very, very closely with our colleagues at GMCA to facilitate the reopening of those facilities on a phased basis. And I think, again, that we were able to do that to good effect, gradually introducing different materials on a kind of, as I say, a 5-phase basis. But throughout that period, we also received great support from our colleagues in Kelly Hopkins' team and in the regulatory enforcement team, who were able to work with Suez and officers from GMCA to ensure that we had a well-regulated site, and that, dare I say, members of the public acted in accordance with the strict guidance which had been provided in terms of safe use of those facilities. The only final point I just wanted to make was in relation to our bulky household waste collection services. Again, they had to be suspended. That is a service that's provided by an organisation called Bulky Bobs. And again, the very nature of that service required those staff to stand down. But again, through a positive dialogue with our contractor, we were able to stand those services back up in June of this year. And again, demand has been very, very healthy since then. Lots of clear outs during the lockdown period, and I think people have been grateful that the service has resumed and have been able to dispose of some of those larger bulky items that they can't fit into the household waste bin, or perhaps don't have the means to transport to one of the local recycling centres. Next slide, please. So just moving forward, there are some of our what I would refer to as our peripheral services that we are planning to reintroduce actually with effect from next week. We had a number of requests for assisted waste collections during the lockdown period, and these are perhaps residents who have a disability, maybe elderly, and don't have support from other members of the family. So we accepted a number of households onto the assisted waste collection service without a waste audit being in place or an inspection or visit to the property. But we are now in the process of, as I say, gearing up to undertake those visits, if you wish, to check in with those particular householders. And similarly, in relation to our waste audits, as you all know, in terms of the GM Sustainable Waste Management Strategy and the Council's aspirations with regard to diversion of waste from landfill, we are very, very keen to ensure that our residents are recycling to the maximum ability, and an important part of that process, if you wish, is working with local residents to understand what their requirements are, what type of waste they generate, and how best that can be recycled and moved away from the residual waste bin. One of the other things that we are keen to do as well is to start to undertake again some participation monitoring in terms of those residents who are engaging on a regular basis with our recycling services, because again that will then provide us with the opportunity to start to bring in interventions to support continued high levels of performance in terms of our household waste recycling service. I think probably just before we move to the next slide, I've not particularly teased out within this slide deck the role of our fleet management service, but I think it's a service that I just wanted to identify, a support service, but one which has continued throughout the lockdown period to provide essential maintenance and repair services, not just to the waste collection service, but to, as I say, our street scene and environmental services in terms of the wide range of plant and equipment that we utilise to ensure that the borough is obviously maintained to a good environmental standard. Next slide, please. Cemeteries and crematoria, perhaps no surprises, members, has been a service that's been very much at the forefront of the pandemic, and sadly for the wrong reasons. This service has continued to operate as you would expect throughout the entire COVID-19 lockdown period and beyond that, and has obviously had to mobilise resources to respond to sadly an increase in demand for that service. We actually reached the point midway through April where we had to increase the number of cremations which were available per day. We ordinarily operate on the basis of a maximum number of cremations of 16 per day, but during the peak period of the pandemic, that was actually increased to 25 for a period, as I say, of approximately 10 days, with the crematoria also being offered to funeral directors over the weekend period. You may recall or will be aware that during that period as well, unfortunately, the number of mourners was limited to 10 at any one time, which was incredibly difficult for the families concerned. But I'm pleased to say that over recent weeks, following revised government guidance, we have been able to review the number of mourners who are able to attend funeral services, either within the chapels themselves or at the graveside. And you can see from the slides that for the small chapel, that's now been extended to 16 mourners and 26 for the larger West Chapel. Again, not I'm sure what our residents would want and hope for. However, certainly a positive move forward, and one which we hope in time will continue to, as I say, to increase in terms of the number of people who can safely attend funeral services. Next slide, please. Thank you. Bolton Market, again, is an area that falls under my area of responsibility, and again you will no doubt be aware as local residents that the market did continue to trade throughout the lockdown period in terms of the fruit and veg halls and the meat and fish provision, again an essential service for local residents, and the market was well supported throughout that period. As we've emerged from lockdown, we have been able to extend the offer at Bolton Market to reintroduction of the lifestyle hall, the cabin traders, and the external market, all of which opened in June. The market continues to have good footfall, but clearly as local businesses, as local traders, we also have to recognise the challenges that the traders have faced themselves as a consequence of the, as I say, the pandemic. And we have been working with the traders within Bolton Market and their representatives to offer financial support over the forthcoming 18 months through rent deferment, which just hopefully provides those traders with an opportunity to put themselves back on an even footing, and to not perhaps have the anxiety and concern in relation to full payments of rent during that period. It will vary from trader to trader, no doubt, but we felt it was important to support the traders as they begin to return to business within the marketplace. Next slide, please. The Albert Halls, again, you will be very familiar with the Albert Halls facility. Sadly, the halls had to close on the 21st of March, as many licensed premises, theatre venues closed. The shows that were in the diary for the remaining part of 2020 have been sadly cancelled, and that includes the pantomime, which was due to take place this year. We do have some further shows in the calendar at this moment in time for the period January through to March of next year, but we are having positive discussions with those event organisers with a view to rescheduling those particular performances for 2021 or in some cases 2022. It is not inconceivable that there will be updated guidance, and we would have the opportunity to perhaps revisit whether or not it would be safe to deliver the shows which will run from January to April, but that would be very much a decision that we would base on the economics of the performance and whether it was financially viable to do that. But throughout, as I say, we've had a continued dialogue with the actual the providers of the shows themselves, and they are all incredibly receptive to returning to Bolton in the new year, as I say, to be able to perform the shows that have been in the diary prior to the lockdown period. Certainly what we will do is obviously work with our ticket provider, Key Tickets, to offer refunds or the opportunity to carry forward tickets to rescheduled events. But sadly, as I say, this is one of the services that continues to be affected by the pandemic. But as you will be very much aware from press coverage, this is certainly not unique to Bolton. This is an industry-wide concern at this moment in time, and there are many theatres and performance spaces throughout the country which are suffering the same plight at this moment in time. You will also be aware that the Northern Restaurant is located within the Albert Halls. We are at present having a dialogue with the operators of the restaurants, with the Eat Out to Help Out initiative that the government have introduced recently. There is the potential for that service to restart, and we are having a dialogue with the operator. But at this moment in time, they haven't yet reopened the restaurants, and we are maintaining a watching brief and a continued dialogue with Heathcote's, as I say, as we move forward. Next slide, please. Just a quick reference to our school meals and building cleaning services. Again, two key services that are provided by the council: school meals into our primary schools. Obviously, with the closure of many schools, the service was stood down to a degree. However, members, you will be aware, obviously, that the schools have continued to play a role throughout COVID-19 in terms of supporting the children of key workers. And on that regard, it was very important that we responded to that particular requirement and continued to provide services into a number of schools. We initially did that via a hub system, whereby we were able to generate meals from a number of hubs throughout the borough, and obviously ensure that some of our more vulnerable pupils, or the pupils the children of key workers, would continue to be fed whilst they attended school, and that extended into the half-term period as well back in May. But more recently, obviously, as children have come back into school, particularly those in reception year 1 and year 6, we have begun to increase, obviously, the scale of operations across our schools, and have continued initially through packed lunch provision, which was the preference for head teachers when they first returned to the school, through to provision of a menu service, hot meals for the pupils. So again, we are having a continued dialogue with the schools. Obviously, we're in the summer holiday period right now, but we are gearing up to provide, as I say, a full catering service when schools reopen in September, and that will continue to be an important service. Similarly, with regard to our building cleaning services in schools and some of the non-educational buildings that we provide, they, as you would imagine, have played a vitally important role in terms of providing enhanced levels of cleaning within our schools. we've responded favourably to many requests from head teacher colleagues who have been looking to, as I say, extend and increase the specification, if you wish, for cleaning within their schools, but also we've provided a number of reactive services as well in the event that there have been concerns in relation to members of staff who may have been concerned that they were showing symptoms of COVID-19, for example. So two key services that I have no doubt will continue to play an important part in supporting our schools community and the wider community as we move through the year. Next slide, please. I think this is my final slide. Our social needs transport service, again, they have been impacted by the closure of the schools, and in terms of operations over recent months, they have been continuing to transport the children of key workers and vulnerable children into schools. But with regard to adult provision, apart from a small number of adults who've been, as per the slide, attending the autism centre at Thickerford, the adult services transport to day centres was predominantly stood down on the 23rd of March. We have, however, throughout that period continued to support the lunchtime community meal service, which has been operating over 7 days, again using council resources. And we are now having a positive engagement with the schools in preparation for September. At this point in time, guidance is indicating that we can work, plan and operate on the basis of fully utilised transport vehicles. And we are now working with the schools to establish how they intend to manage school provision in terms of the creation perhaps of bubbles for particular year groups, for particular groups within year groups, and obviously we will reflect those arrangements in terms of the transport provision that we make moving forward. I think probably just a small nod to the transport social needs transport service as well in terms of the wider support that they've offered. You will recall at the start of this presentation I referred to some of the problems and the challenges that we'd faced in terms of our frontline environmental services and waste collection being an example where we've had to reduce the number of people in the cab. Our social needs transport colleagues have actually supported those frontline operational services, moving members of staff around the borough to support key frontline services such as waste collection, whilst they've not been able to travel together as a collective in the cab. I think, members, that concludes my presentation. Perhaps if we can just flick the slide to confirm that, but yes, if I may, I'll now hand over to my colleague John Kelly, who will provide an overview of the Highways and Engineering Service and the impacts of COVID-19.
Thanks, John. Good evening, all. In terms of Highways and Engineering, as you can probably imagine, we had to maintain our emergency highway services. People were still crashing into things even though there was less traffic. We've still had different bouts of weather that have caused a bit flooding and various other emergencies. And of course you still get potholes opening up because of that weather. So that has continued, as it always does, on a 24/7 operational basis. We worked that so that we were keeping the on standby crew as a single pod working on their own throughout the week. They were on service while we were doing other elements of work, and we did enhance it slightly so that we had spare capacity if it came down that we lost any of the guys through any issues or needing to isolate for a period. And those things did happen, and the team swung into position to make sure that we kept that cover going. In terms of the design side of things and traffic, street work management and looking after the contractors that were out there, we have been able to maintain that throughout. Everyone's been working from home, and that either being by remote meetings or occasional site meetings. But we have kept that going overall. Initially getting over some of the IT issues, which I'm sure everybody's had across the board, but we have been able to maintain that now and are virtually fully functional now on all aspects of all the software and other elements that we need to use in terms of design overall. The capital programme with our contractors needed to shut down at least initially, while we assessed what could and couldn't be done in work. As it happened, we got government direction that construction and particularly highway works should be accelerated where possible. And that is what we've done with our contractors, and look at that across the board. There's a lot of very, very early guidance for construction work to ensure we got the right distancing in place, the right methods of working. Actual site work soon got up and was able to be working across the board. It very quickly overcame the problems that we got on site. I will mention a bit later in terms of actually dealing with it around our in-house workforce, which is a slightly different issue on that. So as I said, we were able to accelerate the programme, and as you probably see, there's been quite a lot of work going on across the borough. In terms of parking enforcement, we did suspend that for a short period, again, while we were looking at it with our contractor of how they could work. We actually found problems with not enforcing, with people then parking dangerously on where there were restrictions, and then actually later when the parking was completely opened up, there was no spare parking across the borough, and we were getting quite a lot of complaints that people couldn't actually we weren't getting any turnover on parking, and so we needed to come back in place and actually manage again the parking. A lot of the parking is about managing traffic and managing turnover overall, not the popular opinion of just enforcement. We'll just go on to the next slide, please. I'll say the operational teams were reintroduced originally on limited bubbles to reduce the risk, but still address urgent maintenance issues that we have. We've over time and for a good few weeks now been fully operational with our in-house teams. As I mentioned, one of the difficulties that we did actually have, and it's not the doing the work, it's actually moving your staff through the depots so that you reducing the amount of contact with different teams, the space that you've got for them to go to canteens and welfare facilities, and actually move through the depot themselves. That and crew up, get out on site. Those are the very difficult things to deal with, and quite a lot of work, risk assessment, working with the union, very closely with the unions to make sure that everybody was comfortable with what we're doing, and taking the time to do that, not rushing into it, and making sure that we could actually get there and we could confidently get on with the work. Some of the work that we could do with single members of staff was continue with the safety inspections. Initially, we just worked on that on emergency reports and seeing what was actually out there, because those reports were still coming in from members of the public and members and others. So we dealt with those, and again, that's where we were then using some of our teams to go out and deal with them. But subsequently, we've built that up to continue with our normal cyclic inspections, and now and that we're picking up again ad hoc requests from members of the public and members, and dealing with those inspections as we normally would do. The only part of the service that's not operated at any level since lockdown, in fact, even from the week before, the 23rd, were the school crossing patrols. We're looking at how we can get that back in. I'm sure you can understand with the age profile of some of the staff in the school crossing patrol service, we need to be very careful in terms of exposure and any levels of shielding that may be needed. But there's also could be issues with the sites themselves to ensure we've got social distancing at some of these sites, where we really are going to have to look at that of what can and can't be done at some places, and make sure that we've got adequate mitigation or controls within place so that we can get that up and running as soon as we possibly can. Throughout the time, the service has also supported the rest of the council and others, ensuring we're using our vehicles to get essential supplies around, which John was saying, about the SNT side of things as well. But we have also picked up traffic issues associated with the test centres, reopening the recycling sites, and as you'll be aware, we've also introduced measures to support social distancing on the highway, and looking at how we sign that and what space we can and can't do. The government has released a considerable amount of funding to support active travel. This was actually at very, very short notice, and we had to try and do something that was reasonable and could be managed within the borough. And we have actually been very successful with the schemes that we've already put forward on that, and we're looking at further schemes in respect to that. So overall, basically, things have kept going on highways in general, and although they might not be around the people being picked up on everything, a lot of the work has carried on. So I'll pass over to Kelly now to pick up on the neighbourhood services side of things.
Good evening. Yeah, just taking you briefly through my services. So members will be aware that leisure centres reopened with restricted hours. We're running booking systems on the Serco managed leisure centres at the moment, and obviously additional safety measures, including moving equipment around so that gym users can use equipment in a socially distanced fashion. We opened up the Central Library as soon as government gave us the green light to resume service, and that was open for browsing. That is currently open for browsing and computer use. We've also reopened a further 5 community libraries, and they are all open for order and collect. Again, just to reiterate, both leisure centres and library services and museum services were all part of the government shutdown that went live in March. In terms of our current offer, the aquarium does remain closed, unfortunately, because members will have visited the aquarium, I'm sure, on a number of occasions, and it's quite a tight space. So in terms of being able to allow users to pass safely within that space, at the moment we don't feel that we can adequately ensure social distancing because of generally just the access corridor down to the main aquarium there. The museum is open. Unfortunately, we are having to operate on reduced opening times, but I'm really pleased to say that when it did reopen, the museum, visitors are back, particularly families, since the school holidays have started, and we're seeing footfall that obviously isn't where it would be in comparison to last year, but still we're seeing healthy footfall through the museum. Allotments are partially open, but again, because we're unable to provide a COVID secure facility for buildings and toilets, they've had to remain closed, unfortunately. If I could have the next slide. In terms of parks, our parks, as you'll be aware, never closed. They were vital for residents, people in Bolton to undertake their daily hour of exercise when we were in full lockdown. However, we have suspended events and large fairgrounds so that there won't be any events in parks for the foreseeable future until things change. Our grounds maintenance, landscape and street cleansing services wound down for a very short period of time at the beginning of lockdown, but they became very swiftly operational. Focusing on issues around waste, as John Dyson's already alluded to. We diverted staff to support waste collection rounds, also dealing with some of the waste management issues, because obviously families, there were a lot more people at home, they were generating more waste. There were incidents of fly tipping, generally in our hotspot areas, but we deployed staff, so we had a very rapid response for clearing away fly tips, particularly where they were a risk to public health. We've got more staff back in the workplace now for cleansing services and grounds. However, we do have some continuing service disruption that's linked basically to issues we're having to deal with around social distancing. So at the moment, we're only allowed to deploy 1 member of staff per vehicle. Staff in neighbourhoods tend to use smaller vehicles. It's something that we're looking to review, and we're working with public health colleagues and members of the Recovery Board to look at a review of that current policy, again in consultation with union colleagues. Parks and play areas are open. They were opened, play areas opened again following government announcement mid-July. Our cafes are now offering a takeaway service in both Queen's and Mossbank. Bowling greens and cricket are being used. The cricket pitches, bowling greens are being used, but that is on a reduced usage, and again that's in order to comply with government guidelines. Unfortunately for now, rounders, very popular sport in the summer in Bolton, and football remain suspended, but that is likely to open up over the coming weeks and months. Again, in terms of accessing changing facilities, because of the additional cleaning regimes that are required and a lack of capacity to be able to maintain those sorts of higher cleansing standards, the football changing facilities will remain closed for the foreseeable future, and certainly won't be open when the football season resumes. Pest control services was again stood down. However, we did maintain sewer baiting because that was something that could be undertaken safely by individual operatives. We've now resumed outside treatment works only. We have been working to resume inside treatment works, and again we'll be looking to bring that on stream shortly over the next few weeks. Our taxi and licensed premises licensing team have remained fully operational throughout. They were very fortunately able to just kind of plug in and play and move our office space to individual staff members' homes, and all of the team are working remotely now. We've moved mountains, I would say, in terms of the licensing function over the last few months, and the council has had a long-standing commitment to introduce digital applications and digital solutions within licensing, and with the assistance of colleagues in IT, we've now been able to develop a whole host of online applications now for taxi drivers, for them to register their own applications, for them to register new vehicles, and for them to make other changes to their licenses, and that's been a real step in the right direction for that service, and obviously for the trade locally. Again, our environmental health, pollution control and trading standards teams, because of the regulatory functions that they perform, they've been operational throughout. Again, similarly already geared up for mobile working, and so the teams have been absolutely working flat out to deal with COVID. Extensive work supporting businesses, pubs, shops, retailers, other service providers, to ensure that when the economy started to open up, that all of those businesses in Bolton were aware of their responsibilities and their remits, and to make sure that they were operating under COVID regulations. So that's been a huge piece of work, and that team has been really pulling out the puddings, to use a phrase, since lockdown first came into play and throughout the recovery process. Have the next slide. In terms of our community safety teams, the area forums haven't been taking place, as members will be aware. Neighbourhood management has remained operational, and staff there have been dealing with a number of member inquiries and inquiries from the community, trying to again to progress some of the funding allocations and things and get those projects delivered. Community safety, prevent programme and community cohesion continue to operate as usual, again with the whole of that team just working remotely from home. And again, there's project support, still again working really hard to support urgent projects and savings reviews. So I suppose what I would say is in addition to the challenges of COVID and of trying to run huge operational services in a very different way, we've obviously got the general business, council business to continue with, and that team again have been working very hard to make sure that you know, it's business as usual in terms of serving reviews and progressing, you know, key strategic projects. I think that's it from me.
Thank you, members. I just want to touch on economic development and regeneration. So in terms of my service area, excuse me, corporate property has been fully operational. They've been doing a lot of work to support the recovery process. I think Jerry alluded to earlier on the strategic asset management plan, and that's been progressing all the way through lockdown to identify the ability to manage our assets and inspect the buildings and decide on repairs and operational issues. But also that team has been working extensively throughout the lockdown on the recovery process and undertaking the risk assessments and working with each of the individual teams to get those signed off, to ensure that as and when each of the buildings are ready to become operational again, that the services can do that in a safe manner. Business support have been actively engaging with businesses and working with business rates to provide the government grants to businesses. And there's probably, well, there are certainly 4,944 payments that have been made, and members will be familiar with the various grants, the small business grants, the £25,000 grants and the £10,000 grants, and there's also discretionary grants that have been done as well to support those businesses through the COVID period, and to ensure that we can successfully bring those businesses back into the town centres and district centres post-COVID. And members also have seen a lot of the work in around the high streets of the town centre and district centres, and there's a lot more to come yet. There's also the free parking that's due to start on in August, to support the town centres and district centres. The workshop has been operating at a reduced service and going online to support people in getting back into work. But that service has also been supporting the business grants and business rates and supporting local businesses. Community housing is partly operational. There is a backlog on housing standards inspections of approximately 100 inspections. That's being prioritised, but again, virtual inspections are being undertaken in consultation with the owners of the properties. Within that, but the housing and homeless service has also been operating throughout on a virtual basis and via the phone, to ensure that if there are people in urgent need, then the officers can support them to find alternative accommodation or access the council's mediation service to get younger people back into their own homes with their parents. In terms of the planning service, hopefully members will have seen the planning committees that have been done virtually, and I think those have actually been done very successfully, and members might have seen some quite difficult press around the country for other councils that have started up planning committees in a virtual world and have had some real difficulties, and I think the 4 committees that we've had have been done very well, been done on this basis, so they're fully controlled, and so that's allowed us to successfully continue to make decisions. The remainder of the services, including building control, have been operational throughout, working remotely, doing remote inspections on building control, and the officers are now back on site doing building control inspections with a very active need for that service to get Bolton building and to get Britain building. And also the only area within planning that's been paused is the enforcement visits and responding to enforcement inquiries, but that's operational again, and obviously the complaints are being prioritised. The other area is the town centre regeneration programme, which has been very active all the way through lockdown, both within Bolton and the district centres. And applications for 2 future high street fund bids have been put in, one for Bolton town centre and one for Farnworth. There's the master plans for each of the district centres, with ongoing negotiation over trying to bring those forward quickly. Members might have seen reference to Farnworth town centre, the shopping centre being demolished now, which just shows that things have been. So that's the purchase of the shopping centre and the start of demolition, all during the COVID period. And the last thing is the Towns Fund bid, again a £25 million fund, with a recently announced £1 million additional fund that's got to be submitted in August, with the main proposals being submitted before the 31st of October. So there's a great deal of activity, most of it operating virtually, but I think most of it operating successfully to support both businesses and householders who want and need a service off my particular set of officers. And I'll hand you back to Jerry now. Thank you.
I think, Chairman, I'll be doing questions on this now and then going to the work programme, because that's item 6 on the agenda.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Chair, just to summarise, I hope that's given everyone a good feel for what the Director's been doing over the last 3 months. I'll now hand it back to you for questions, and we're all here ready to answer any questions that members may have.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And whilst I can't see anyone wanting to ask a question just yet, but in order to give people the chance to speak in the chat, I'd just like to ask you if you could pass on our gratitude to all your staff for working diligently through the pandemic, and the people of Bolton wouldn't have been able to exist, in the manner that we have without everyone doing the work that they do so well. So thank you very much. Right then, so Councillor Heslop.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Sorry, 2 questions. One for John Kelly, one for Kelly, and a third one for Jerry. John, you talked about parking contraventions and the fact that the team were up and running again. The question is, I've had very recently, a few queries from people about contraventions in Farnworth Town Centre and Kersley. John, could you confirm they're actually visiting the other town centres in the borough? Kelly, when I'm scared of the pubs closing, basically. When the pubs opened on the very first night, I saw some serious problems in the town of Farnworth, and I'm worried that these places are hotbeds for any transmission of COVID-19. They were completely flouting the guidelines, And I'm wondering whether your team is intervening maybe over the phone just to check whether these places are compliant. Your thoughts on that? I'm not sure. I'm very worried about what's happening there in these pubs in Farnworth and indeed Kersley. The pubs I'm talking about are actually in the Kersley ward. And Jerry, finally, the question about the Future High Street Fund. I think we've got a figure of 19.2 million that's gone to central government, and I'm wondering what the top figure is. Can you discuss that in this arena? And more so, is the council putting in the promised, I think, £12 million towards the Farnworth Town Centre Master Plan? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we are fully deployed with the civil enforcement now. They patrol certain routes. What I would ask, if you're picking up particular problems in an area, flag them up to the parking services inbox, and they'll make sure that the contractor is aware of certain areas and they will pick up on them. I mean, they can't be in all places at all times. So, you know, they do the routes they do. They know where the usual hotspots are. But if there are other problems, we'll always investigate and have a look and try and improve the situation.
Is it over to me now? About licensing. Yeah, Councillor Heslop. Just to kind of reassure you. I'm not live yet, right? Just to reassure you, Councillor Heslop, from the minute the pubs went into lockdown, we were responding to various complaints that came through from members of the public, from members. All of those complaints were investigated jointly with licensing officers from GMP. When we became aware that obviously the restrictions were easing up and licensed premises were going to be permitted to reopen, we had a big online meeting with various licensees within the town to find out what their plans were, to discuss the sorts of social distancing measures that would need to be put in place in order for them to, you know, to resume service in a safe manner. The licensing team, as I say, that particularly licensing enforcement, have remained active, doing responsive visits where we've had complaints. And in addition to that, we sent a questionnaire out to every single licensed premises in the borough, asking them what their plans were, again, what COVID secure measures they were putting in place in order to make sure that their customers were protected. Again, reminding them of the need to take registers around test and trace. We had a really good response to that questionnaire. We had the vast majority were completed, and then we went through them, and any issues that we identified, we then made contact with those premises and I suppose reminded them from the guidelines. The outstanding licensed premises have been visited, or actually been visited this week by officers. And we will be getting them to complete those questionnaires. And again, if there are any contraventions, you know, we'll take the necessary appropriate action along with GMP to deal with those premises. What I would say is that all of our visits are intelligence based. So if members become aware of any rumours or any suggestions that there are issues within licensed premises, please flag them with the team. We've got, you know, the licensing inbox. Just send those in to us and we'll make all necessary investigations. Obviously, we need to make sure that, you know, the licensed trade, which has suffered really badly because of COVID, you know, resumes service and operates in a safe way so that, you know, infection, you know, it doesn't become a source of infection within any premises in Bolton. So please do, if you've got any specific concerns, just contact me or the team.
Councillor Heslop, hi. Just in reference to your question around Farnworth, the exact figure that we bid for was actually 19.275 million. The reason that didn't reach to 25 million is because there are requirements to meet certain value for money returns. for every pound of public money, we need to justify that with a particular ratio of other funding coming in from other sources. And so the more you bid for, the more you have to get in from other sources. And we felt that the most that we could realistically bid for was 19.275 million. In terms of the money that's coming in from the council has never changed its position, and that is that it's allocated £16 million towards 4 district centres across the borough. They've never at any time said how much of that funding will go to any one district, and they made it quite clear that the amount of funding that goes to each district will be dependent on the quality and the needs that come out of the master planning process. So the final allocation of funding is yet to be determined, but there is, I can certainly confirm that there is 12 million plus a further 4 million up to which was allocated to the district centres, and that funding is in the budget.
Thank you. Next to speak is Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Chair. I've just left a message to Councillor Evans. His chat's not showing up. So I think I've got 3 questions. Before I start, can I echo your comments, Chairman, about thanks to the service, like all other aspects of the council and our partners. I think you guys have done a really, really brilliant job in very, very difficult circumstances. And have, I just think made things much easier than perhaps they could have been, especially in the basic environmental services that people see on a day-to-day basis. My first question is nothing to do with COVID really, and it's just about the future of waste and recycling. We've had full recycling services in place now in Bolton for a good number of years, and it's saved us an incredible amount of money over that time in waste disposal costs. There is an argument to be made now as we head into very, very uncertain times financially that we need to up the ante on this. There is an argument that there's no reason anymore why we have members of our population who are still not partaking in recycling. Still too much recycle that's going into the grey bin that directly costs all the council taxpayers in Bolton a lot of money. So I would put an appeal in to Councillor Warren, who I understand is committed to a future PDG on this, to have a serious look at this issue of upping our recycling rates before we look at ad hoc charging, as upping our recycling rates will save us a hell of a lot of money. Chair, if John Dyson wants to respond to that, I would appreciate it. But I have another question for John, which is in terms of the Northern restaurant, and I appreciate there's perhaps some commercial sensitivity around this, but I do know that the council had certain commitments, shall we say, to the Northern restaurant. Since it's been closed since March, how has that closure affected our commitments to the restaurant? Has the restaurant applied for and received business support? And if successful for that business support, has this affected our commitments to that restaurant? Chair, I have 2 more questions after this. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. Am I live?
It looks like there you go.
There we go. Thank you, Councillor Peel. I think if I can deal with the waste management issue first. I think probably first and foremost I would echo your comments. I think our residents, I have to say, based upon the performance in my last authority, have done an exceptional job. That has clearly been supported by investments in the service and a waste disposal levy mechanism that effectively entices, incentivises is the better word, recycling, greater levels of recycling performance. I think moving forward, I think we have a number of challenges, probably in terms of financial challenges that the authority may face, and that will require us to clearly review the way that we deliver services moving forward. But equally, I think we need to offset potential proposals against greater community engagements and whether or not we can actually generate greater savings through having our residents divert more of their waste into the recycling bin than into their residual waste bin. I think one of the other issues that we have to consider moving forward is the government's resources and waste strategy, and that will make it compulsory from 2023-24 for food waste collections to be delivered. Clearly we benefit from that service in Bolton, but again we would want to extend that service and take up of that service, but we also may want to take the opportunity to review how we deliver those services moving forward. So I think that there is no doubt about it, there remains a very, very strong focus on driving higher levels of recycling performance. I think one of the challenges with all authorities is to invest in the necessary resources to be able to, as I say, get out and engage with the community at the doorstep, you know, through wider marketing and communications regarding sustainable waste management. And I think that will be the piece for myself and other colleagues in the management team to consider as we move forward. But I would absolutely echo your comments that the more that we can engage residents, the more likely we are to reduce our costs associated with disposal and perhaps avert other options that we may need to think about in terms of future delivery. So I'll perhaps pause there in terms of waste management. I think in relation to the northern restaurants, you are absolutely right. There is a great deal of commercial sensitivity around this, and I think on that basis I would probably be reluctant to play out that conversation during this particular forum, forgive me, but I think probably what we can say is that we have had a continued dialogue with colleagues in the northern restaurants over the last 3 months. There probably remains still a degree of uncertainty as to when they will resume operations. As I say, they have indicated a desire to do so, but we haven't yet been able to sort of get over that line, if you wish. So I think as and when we do that, then we will take the opportunity to revisit our relationship with them, but equally the contract which sits around that arrangement is suitably robust, that it gives the council options to exercise should we feel that relation is not sustainable moving forward, or dare I say it, should the northern restaurants operators themselves feel that relationship is not sustainable because of the economics that have come to play out through COVID-19.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to our producer for anticipating I was coming back then. I appreciate your answers to that, John, in particular on waste. I think it's very helpful if we're all thinking the same way on this. I will have to get back to you about the northern. There are questions that need to be asked and need to be answered, perhaps in a private setting. My second question is for it's a two-part question really, for Paul Whittingham and perhaps Jerry. There were three sets of £75 million, three sets of £25 million that were bid for from various town centre bids, totaling 75 million that Councillor Heslop alluded to. When this went through the exec member meeting, I think last month, there were no details at that point on what this money was actually going to be earmarked for. So to Paul, do we have an update on that? And a difficult question perhaps for Jerry, which he may or may not be able to answer, but one of our key partners for Bolton Town Centre Regen is the Beijing Construction Company. Do we have any fears that the stagnating diplomatic relationship between ourselves and China over Hong Kong, in particular talk of trade wars, etc., and de-investment in the UK. Do we have any fears that this could actually scupper our entire regeneration plans? I appreciate that's a difficult question, and it might be better placed to the Foreign Secretary, but I would appreciate the best you can do with that, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. In terms of the, you might be aware that there is an active Towns Board that's going to decide on the priorities for the £25 million of the Towns Fund. In terms of the bidding for both Farnworth and the Town Centre, that was determined on the basis of projects that have been worked up for a number of months and years, that are part of the Town Centre master plan, in terms of the Bolton Town Centre, and a part of the Farnworth Town Centre master plan, and those are being put in to support those two master planning areas. The 19.2, the focus of that is around creating a new town centre following the demolition of the shopping centre that's being undertaken at the moment, with some other sort of investment in the surrounding area. In terms of the town centre, some of the money will be going towards, if it's secured, will be going towards Church Wharf, and some other of the money will be going towards a key development on the old Icon site, and the council will be working up those schemes in more detail should we be successful in securing that funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. It's not such a difficult question, really, because BCEGI Limited is a UK company registered in the UK, and their funding is based in the UK. So we've got no doubt that they will continue to meet the obligations that they have undertaken to meet as part of the Town Centre Regeneration Programme. So I don't think that unless it gets to a real drastic situation, I guess, where they could conceivably find themselves starved of cash, but I don't see that as a likelihood in any time soon, because it's a strong UK-based company with hundreds of employees, UK employees, based here in the northwest, and we don't see any reason why they would not be able to fulfil their commitments to the Town Centre Regeneration Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peel, have you finished your questions?
I have, Chair, and can I thank the officers for the answers?
Of course, yes. Thank you very much. Councillor Weatherby.
Oh, sorry, I've got my camera on the way around, so I do apologise. I'd just like to say and reiterate everyone's thanks to the team, etc. My question really is, there's actually three questions, is regarding to waste and recycling. There has been an absolute increase in fly tipping, including on businesses, private households, and what my sort of question is we're getting a recovery on things from council land, etc., and privately owned land. However, there just seems to be this mindfulness about unadopted areas, and it's really difficult for people to understand that, just because the land is unadopted, then they're not given the same sort of service with getting the sites cleared, and I just think absolutely some consideration needs to be made for this, for the unadopted area, especially with the pandemic, you know, with the COVID-19 situation. So my question is there any provisions in for that at the moment? And my second question is in regards to fly tipping, the waste what's being left in people's gardens, both from private landlords, private lets, houses and council properties. If a neighbour complains about waste in a neighbouring garden, would this prompt a bin audit for the premises producing all the waste, or could this be something that's looked at? Or is it the actual property owner who has to request a bin audit? And my final question is in conjunction with council appeals, recycling, looking at the recycling from households, if this could be extended to businesses as well, because, you know, we've come across a lot of fly tipping in Farnworth, which has obviously come from businesses based on what the waste is being tipped. Could this be also included in the PDG with regards to looking at the waste recycling? And businesses, are they actually using a provider for collecting of waste each week? Is there anything anybody looks at to make sure businesses are you know, using waste providers? If that's okay. Does that make sense? Hello?
Hi, Councillor Bagnall, can you hear me? It's John Dyson. I think this is probably a series of questions that would be best addressed by both myself and my colleague Kelly Hopkins. Am I live?
I think we're going live shortly.
Hi, John. I think your video's switched off at the moment.
Here we are. Thank you. Yeah. I think thank you for that, Councillor. I think probably a series of questions best addressed by both myself and my colleague Kelly Hopkins, who's obviously on the call as well. If I can maybe just take the issue in relation to commercial premises, and again Kelly may also want to comment on this, but and also the bin audits, and then I will pass across to Kelly, who I'm sure will respond in relation to fly tipping activity, littering on unadopted land, etc. I think firstly in relation to the bin audits, if I may, I think this arguably relates to an issue perhaps where residents aren't necessarily demonstrating environmentally responsible behaviours. That may or may not be in a private property, it might be a rented property. Generally in relation to bin audits, we tend to respond to those requests when a resident perhaps requests an additional bin, an additional residual waste bin, and we would seek to work with them to identify opportunities to recycle more of their waste. So we wouldn't necessarily respond to issues of, as I say, if I can use the term, irresponsible environmental behaviour where they are effectively littering the front garden. Quite often they will be issues that would need to be addressed through the owner of the property, or if it's the case of a private landlord, through the landlord itself. So as I say, bin audits tend to be more services provided in response to requests for additional residual waste bins. I think in relation to commercial waste premises, the council does provide a commercial waste service, but as I'm sure you can appreciate, we also operate in a competitive marketplace, and there are many other providers who provide that service. It is incumbent upon businesses to both recycle as well as generate residual waste. And certainly through the work that we do with our trade waste officer, we are working with businesses to ensure that they also are provided with a recycling service. Businesses have a duty of care to dispose of their waste responsibly, but again, that's something that Kelly might want to just reflect on in terms of the work of her team from a regulatory enforcement point of view, and I'm sure that Kelly will also pick up the issues in relation to, as I say, littering and fly tipping. If I could perhaps pass over, please, Chair.
Kelly, would you mind just continuing with the camera on John? I've just had a little technical issue.
No problem at all. Yeah, I'll
Sorry
throw my
about that.
voice to you, John. Just in terms of unadopted areas, I know this is a huge frustration for members where they have, large areas of residential properties where there are unadopted roads. And it's very frustrating for the individual residents that live there. But I think we have to be really clear that the council doesn't have a statutory obligation or the resources to clear fly-tipped waste from unadopted areas. That's not to say in normal times we don't look at tackling those sorts of issues. Generally, we do that in conjunction with ward members where we know there are hotspot areas. What we frequently do is we would deploy community payback teams to go and clear those areas. Obviously, with COVID, that service has been suspended, so we haven't had those resources open to us. In addition, as it won't come as a surprise to members, COVID placed additional pressures on our service, and whilst the actual reports over a number of weeks didn't seem to be increasing in terms of the number of reported fly tips, certainly the perceptions that there were more fly tips out there was very clear. And then as lockdown progressed, there were increasing numbers of fly tips. What we did to address that was we diverted staff from other areas to just basically have a rapid response. So we cleared fly tips where there was a risk to public health, particularly where it was things like food waste or it was attracting vermin, etc. So I think the issue of clearing waste from unadopted roads is just an ongoing problem, and I don't think it's something that we'll ever be able to solve to everybody's satisfaction, just purely because of the resource limitations that we have within the service. We struggle to keep on top of our statutory responsibilities, never mind venturing onto private land. So I know that's not the answer that you would want to hear, councillor, but I think I need to be realistic in my response to you. In terms of businesses, as John said, I think again when we went into lockdown and shops and commercial premises weren't operating, obviously the waste wasn't being generated, and again commercial waste during lockdown wasn't an issue that we were getting frequent reports about. Obviously as businesses resumed, our normal kind of regimes apply in terms of expecting any business that cancelled the waste disposal policy while they were in lockdown and not operating, that needs to resume now, and that's something that we will be following up on.
Thank you very much for that. Next, Councillor McKeon.
Thank you, Chair. 2 words of praise and an expression of regret. The first praise is for the department. However, Councillor Peel and Councillor Weatherby have articulated that, so I won't delay, but what the place department has done has been fantastic during the COVID emergency. The second praise is for the presentations that we've been sent. I think the one particularly which highlighted the officers in the department and the responsibilities of the department were really informative and show the range of services that the police department is responsible for. However, the regret is related to those presentations because they only came this afternoon, I think, and I was only able to read them shortly before this meeting. Now, I presume officers will apologise and express that the capacity is the problem. So my question following up from that is, if capacity is a problem, is anything being done to address that issue? Thank you.
Hi, I'll address that question. I'm not really sure it was capacity in this case. It was probably down to the fact that the timetabling for scrutiny was rather shorter than normal. The warning that we had that there was to be a scrutiny meeting this evening was somewhat shorter than we'd normally have, and therefore took a bit of time to assemble the project across the whole directorate. I myself was on leave last week, and I didn't think I knew of the Scrutiny Committee when I went on leave, which was about 8 days ago. So I think that's the reason for this particular issue. I do apologise for the lateness of the distribution, because even then we probably should have had it out to you at least a day earlier. But it was held up, just kind of double checking some of the facts and making sure that we gave you the kind of proper comprehensive presentation that we wanted to. So I do apologise for that, and we'll take that on board in future scrutiny committees, obviously. I think capacity, just moving on to your second point, I guess, which is around capacity. I think it's obvious from the presentations we've been given that we haven't had any increased capacity. In fact, our capacity has been reduced because of COVID itself. We have had people who have been sheltered. We have a very, I mean, we haven't referred to it, but we have quite an elderly workforce across place. A lot of our people working in neighbourhoods and waste. You know, the average age is over, I think, over 56. You know, so we were particularly prone to COVID-19 and to the impact it had on people and on their fears for their health. So we did have a number of people, you know, that were shielding because of ill health themselves, or because of family members and so on, and that reduced our capacity. And yet we've pretty much delivered almost the same kind of services. So people have stepped up. Our productivity, I'm pretty sure, has increased significantly. You know, in terms of my individual input from officers, and that's probably the case right across the service, because you know, we've been covering for people who have not been at work because of the COVID pandemic. Moving forward, that capacity is not going to change. That situation is unlikely to change, because we are now going to be in. Well, we are currently in let's not forget, the Police Department had to make £5.7 million worth of savings over the last 2 years. You know, that's a continual issue that's going to face local government, not just Bolton, but other local authorities, and particularly the impact of COVID might see some significant impact on revenue budgets. So I don't see capacity increasing in the near future, and I think what we need to do is very, very seriously look at productivity, and that's a challenge for everybody, every team in the organisation, is to increase our productivity, reduce our absenteeism and so on as we move forward, try and get the most out of the workforce that we've got. I'm not saying that we're not doing that at the minute, but I think there's always room for improvement, and that's something that we probably have to focus on a bit more carefully in the coming months and years, I would suspect. Hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Thank you. That's a very interesting answer, particularly about the age profile of the people who work in the service. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested last week at the GM Scrutiny Committee, which I was chairing, to find that there's £81.1 million allocated to Greater Manchester for brownfield regeneration and remediation. Can I ask officers what proposals we have submitted, or what are we proposing to submit in terms of Bolton obtaining a realistic share, given some of the problems we've got with brownfield remediation and thus future development opportunities, particularly residential?
Chair, I'll address. Thank you, Chair. I'll address that, and then maybe bring Paul Whittingham in also to give a bit of the detail. We have submitted a considerable number of projects and schemes that we thought would be suitable for receipt of some of this funding. There were actually two pots of money. The 81 million was for brownfield development, and there was also another pot of money which was for what they call shovel-ready projects, and I think that totaled around £45 million. So we submitted projects for both of these pots of money. The process that we then entered into was one where across GM there was 454 million, if I remember rightly, worth of projects submitted for the 81 million that had been given by the government. And the money was channeled through GM, as Councillor Walsh rightly points out. And so GM were in a position of trying to select from the 454 million pounds which projects they should put forward for the 81. Unfortunately, in that process, none of our projects were selected as being priority projects. And indeed, if you look at the ones that were selected, 2 of them have taken up almost, I think, 35 million of the 81 million has been taken up by 2 projects, both in Manchester City. So the distribution has been towards big projects. Partly that might be to do with there was an issue that had to be addressed as part of the bid, and that was the ability to deliver these projects within a very short time frame. I think it was the March 2022 that the money had to be actually out the door spent, and you had to have the benefits or the outputs associated with that spend in place. In other words, if you were bidding for money to develop a site for an office building, you had to build the building, have it up and have it occupied by March 2022. So it placed some very severe restrictions on the type of projects that could get through the bidding process, and maybe the ones that have been selected are reflective of the fact that they were well advanced projects previously, prior to this money coming through, that they had significant large developer companies involved who committed resources or were willing to commit resources to the project and were willing to guarantee that their completion by the due date. So it hasn't been at the minute anyway, it hasn't been a particularly fruitful exercise for us, but we've expended a lot of effort in trying to secure these funds. We've not given up entirely. We still think there might be some funds that cascade down from projects that are possibly not able to meet some of the criteria. But at the moment, as things stand, we're not anticipating that we're going to see any of this money, which is interesting, but likely to be the case as long as everything continues to be channeled through GM, which clearly has some positives in terms of our lobbying power with government, but also makes it difficult when it comes to actually selecting individual projects, and because there's frankly so much need within Greater Manchester for brownfield development. So I'll pass over to Paul to see whether he wishes to add to that, because it's him and his team that have been working on the detailed applications.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I suppose what I can add to what Jerry's just put is certainly the Brownfield Land Fund. There's 19 million of that has to be spent by next March, as well as some of the big projects that Jerry's also alluded to, and that could only be used for housing schemes, so that we couldn't use it for mixed use schemes, for instance, and that did cause us some difficulties, because a lot of our schemes are actually mixed use schemes like Crompton Place or Trinity. And in terms of the shovel ready, again, that had to be, so that could be considered for other schemes, and not just residential schemes, but that had to be physically built and completed by March 22. So it literally only gave us 18 months to get everything actually completed, which was a really difficult timescale. The office development at Trinity Gateway was put forward as part of that, and did come off well, and was a good value for money scheme, but others within Greater Manchester beat it. I think there's a meeting the other day of the directors of place within Greater Manchester, and the focus is, and questions are being asked by the government for Greater Manchester to identify other schemes, and there's still £40 million to bid for, so we're still hoping that something will come. But I think there's also a focus on let's see the scale of the difficulties that all councils face, so that the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government can actually put further bids into to the Treasury in advance of the spending review. So we're actively working with Greater Manchester to reinforce those projects, so that if a request for more information comes, then we're ready to bid for that money. And there's separate conversations going on with Homes England. Later on this year, there will be, it's already been announced, a single housing infrastructure bid or programme that's going to be delivered. That will come out in the spending review later on this year. So we're actively speaking to Homes England about the likes of the West Orton bypass and other regeneration schemes, such as at Horwich, to ensure that as many schemes can come forward as possible. And as Jerry's alluded to, all of the detailed work that's required to evidence that the business, the benefit cost ratio that has got to be proved to get money is ready and can be easily submitted to government and to Greater Manchester. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that. Our next question is from Councillor Darvish.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I've got two questions, relatively simple actually, these questions. The first one is that the government actually recently announced a £2 billion fund for the Green Homes grant, and there's an opportunity for local authority to actually tap into some of that funding as well. Specifically, I think they target the deprived wards, and we've been successful in that in the past. We've got the capacity, because the time scales are a bit short. The funding starts in September, and are we going to be able to get our application in for that, because it's crucial we're able to tap into some of that funding. I think my concern is, just like the bicycle vouchers, I think a lot of people will be trying to get hold of this type of funding and miss out on it. So for the authority to actually bid and capture some of this funding would be great. The other question is for John Kelly. Bit disappointing, Cadent, we're going to be starting working on Blackburn Road very soon. It would have been perfect in terms of the levels of traffic currently being low and school not starting yet. Just wondering if there's an update on the Cadent works, because they are substantial and they do take quite a long time on Blackburn Road. Thank you.
Want me to do the highways question?
Yes, please. Thank you, John.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Councillor. In terms of Blackburn Road, what's actually happened is they've changed contractors. The contractor that was due to do it, their contract is finishing shortly, and they weren't willing to put the commitment into it to complete the work on Blackburn Road. It wasn't the time scale. To be honest, from the information we got back, it was how much they could make out of it, and they didn't think they could make enough margin off the back of the job, so they decided to drop it completely. So they are now looking at who the next contractor on that Cadent will employ to reschedule it and look at it, but that will probably mean that it's next year now, not before then. So we'll have to see when they come forward with the proposals of what's in there. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It was ideal for us to be doing it at this time, and that's what we've been pushing for, to get it completed. but unfortunately it was down to external forces on this one. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Who's going to be answering the other part of the question? Jerry, you're muted, by the way.
Sorry, I'll answer, but then I'll probably pass over to Paul. I really don't know is the answer to the question, Councillor, if I'm going to be honest, because my understanding was that the Green Fund was for homeowners and landlords, and so therefore, not being a landlord, we would have a limited ability to apply for funding. I would need to go and check out to see what the scope is for local governments to apply for a block of funding. I don't know whether that would be on the basis of us then distributing it to homeowners and landlords, or whether in fact it's something that we would we don't have property really that we can spend this funding on. I don't know if Paul's got any more information, but clearly it looks like it's something we're going to have to come back to you on unless Paul can give us some further information.
Thank you, Chair. I think it may well be something that would be delivered through our care and repair scheme as well, as in conjunction with Bolton at Home. The bidding would be done via that route. But I can certainly check and get back to Councillor Darvesh with that information. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think it's just recently actually come out that there is an element of it which the local authorities can actually tap into. That'd be great if you could have a look into that, please. Thank you.
Yesterday, Councillor Darvesh.
All right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Our next questioner is Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. A number of questions, so it might be as well if I'll list the questions and then people can have a go at answering them. First one is...
Hold on, Chairman. Sorry, he's not live. Oh, he is now. Right, okay. Yep.
First one is in relation to actual business, because local government is a business these days. We've moved a long way from the old days. And digitalisation, which Kelly mentioned in relation to licensing, seems to indicate, and how we're now working around COVID, indicates we've changed things substantially. We've had questions about how we're going to work from home, etc. So there are savings potentially there around buildings and building use, etc. But the other one I would be interested to, and maybe whether it could be actually put on the scrutiny for later, is a review of how the business is functioning around use of buildings, the savings which may have come from less use of buildings and costs, etc. But also about performance, because a number of businesses which are now working from home, shall I say, have seen significant levels of performance increases around productivity and also around sickness levels. Some organisations, sickness has almost vanished from the workforce. So whether that could be looked at around digitalisation, building use, sickness levels, performance, productivity, maybe something for a later item on scrutiny, because it's a big issue. Maybe some of the questions I've got around actual service delivery, so if people bear with me. We talked around crematoria and the restrictions on crematoria and services, etc. Whilst we're still in the summer period, we're still in it just about, whether there is a possibility of outdoor screening, outdoor seating facilities where we have larger requests for larger numbers of people to attend crematorium services, whether it's feasible or possible, I don't know. In relation to schools and the point that John made around two things, the food and kitchen arrangements for schools and meals, I'm a little bit concerned. It seems a bit vague, I have to be quite honest. My concern is that there's now this massive drive by government, central government, to get kids back in schools. One of the things will be, can we deliver things like meals, etc.? Because if we can't and we struggle, that's an additional problem for teachers and schools to manage. The other issue was around staff, and staff have been using other transport methods to get people about, particularly the waste teams. If we're now using transport to do things what we normally did, i.e. take meals out, etc., schools, etc., we will have a shortfall in capacity in transport, which could have an effect on getting people physically to do certain jobs, such as waste collection. Moving to highways, I have to share Councillor Walsh's concern about GMCA. That there is what appears to be a tendency that we're the back of the queue for GMCA support. And I'll give a few examples, if I may. Daisy-Hill Railway Bridge. We were the bottom of the list for GMCA. Surprisingly, we got some support from our MP, and we've got some money to do the bridge. The pothole fund, which is in GMCA's hand, it was announced in March. We're in August. West Bolton bypass. I know Mr. Whittingham's mentioned it. Again, way down the pecking order as far as GMCA is concerned. A simple scheme which is becoming a real pain is the 5.8 cycling and walking scheme, announced the other week. Virtually a very, very short consultation period time, and will not deliver public engagement. Very bad, in my opinion. It was not enough publicity, and the consultation is far too short. They were going to deliver good quality responses from the public. Just on fly tipping, I have to agree with previous members. We seem to have skated over that one quite easily, and it is a problem. In some areas, it's only adopted back streets. In the West Orton area, we've still got a few fields. Well, Bellway and Peel haven't built on them all yet, so we still have problems in some of our rural areas around fly tipping. I was a bit concerned when we said we weren't able to get cleaning facilities in for football clubs for the season. Are we not talking to clubs about what they can do themselves to get the cleaning regime levels up in facilities? We try and ensure we have as much support as is humanly possible, not only just on the health benefits, but also on community engagement and cohesion. To stop sport completely is having a major impact on those issues. And also on a simple one, it sounds simple, it is not for many members of the public, and that is in relation to things like street cleaning and grass cutting. Grass cutting, actually, I think Kelly will agree, some stuff I've sent in lately is not very good, to say the least. It's poor, and it gives a negative effect on neighbourhoods. It is an issue for some people who pay high levels of council tax. Yes, the council has major problems, but if you're paying a couple of grand a year in council tax and the grass can't even be cut, there's a negative feeling and negative impact. And our last point, you'll be glad to hear, is to Mr. Whittingham probably, and that is in relation to unemployment issues. Obviously, furlough is beginning to fade out. Unemployment levels are already on the increase. And one of my concerns would be capacity-related issues to deal with people who are coming forward, particularly because of universal credit, probably one of the worst ideas ever invented by a certain person. I'll be polite about that. And the demands of universal credit that people go out and try and find a job when we know full well that there will probably be 10% unemployed by Christmas, maybe higher. Whether our unemployment services can even scratch the surface on that. So thank you for your patience, Chairman, and my long list of questions.
Thank you.
Sorry. I was going to suggest that we start with John Dyson, because I think most of the questions are in your area or Kelly's area, and then we'll pick up on the other ones later.
Thanks, Jerry. I think I'm live. I think a couple of questions for me. The first was in relation to our bereavement services, our cemeteries and crematoria service, and I think right now, Councillor, we are working in accordance with government guidance regarding the number of mourners. I do understand that this is a particularly challenging time for families who have lost loved ones, and they understandably want to be involved in funeral services. I think probably the position that the council has taken over the last number of months is that we have to, as I say, adhere to the guidance, but also we've been seeking to work with our colleagues across the wider GM region, ensuring that we adopt to the greatest extent possible consistent standards. And I think right now we have certainly taken the opportunity to review safe capacity within our chapels. The number of mourners who can attend the graveside has increased, which again, as I say, is a positive step forward. But I think the notion of greater levels of attendance at this point in time are perhaps premature. That is not to say, however, that the position won't change as it has done over recent weeks. There are options for families to request screening of services. We have the necessary technology in place to be able to do that. So that perhaps does provide an extended offer and enables other family members, friends to be involved in the process. But certainly in terms of physical attendance, that is the position that we are in at this point in time. But like many things COVID-19, it is a very, very dynamic situation. Just in relation to school meals, obviously that service has stood down at present. We are in the summer holidays, but I think really all I wanted to do there was to offer reassurance that the team are building operational plans for the next term. We are very much working on the basis that we will be providing a full service to all of the schools that we provide catering services to, and the team will be working with head teachers, school leadership teams to ensure that we adapt and flex the service where possible, whilst also ensuring that we, dare I say, meet the obligations we have to our own employees in terms of creating a safe working environment. But I fully expect and anticipate that unless we receive, for want of a better word, special requests from head teachers, that we will deliver the service that they pay for through the service level agreements that are in place. I think the final point that was for me was just in relation to our social needs transport service, and you rightly reflected on the support that they've been providing to frontline operational services, waste collection being, as I say, a prime example. You're absolutely right. There is the potential for a pressure point on that service moving forward. There is no doubt when the school term resumes, the resources that we've been able to draw on over recent months will not be available to us. That is a conversation that I have started with the operational management team, and it's a discussion that will continue over the the weeks ahead, not just with the staff, but with trade union colleagues. There are different ways that we can do this. I am mindful that our trade union colleagues have also proactively highlighted opportunities to maybe bring some staff back together with appropriate COVID-19 precautions in place. So I think, by way of summary, you are right to suggest that there may be a pressure point on the service in terms of being able to move members of staff around the borough independently. But equally, we are very much aware of that risk, and we are beginning to, as I say, develop our plans to be able to mitigate that risk should we find ourselves in that position. And there are a number of options that, as I say, we can consider at this moment in time. So hopefully that offers some further information and reassurance. I'll perhaps hand over to Kelly, if that's okay.
Thank you. Just in terms of your points, Councillor Wilkinson, in terms of us not being able to open football changing rooms, I think that's probably likely to cause less of an issue than perhaps we would anticipate. I mean, certainly the junior leagues, when it's kids football, the kids tend to come, ready, dressed in the strips and kits, etc., and tend not to require use of the changing facilities. I think in terms of the kind of adult leagues, yes, it could pose a bit of an inconvenience for the football teams concerned. However, again, I think we just need to be realistic. We can't provide a safe facility given our current resources in terms of providing a COVID safe environment for people to get changed in. Our general cleaning regimes, the football changing rooms, would be a good sweep out of all the mud and a bit of a wipe round. That's not something we could commit to when pitches are used, very frequently by, a number of teams, on weekend and evening matches. So I would hope, whilst it's not ideal, it would just be a small inconvenience, predominantly for adult teams who, again, could just come, ready changed for the game. In terms of your other issue around grass cutting, yes, thank you for the photographs you sent me this week. And again, completely agree that the quality of the cut, in terms of the example you sent to me, it wasn't good enough. And it's not something that we would, under a normal year, under a normal season and without COVID, that's something that I would have a serious concern about. However, I think given the lack of resources that we've had and the fact that we've had to rely solely on ride-on grass cutters, which means that if there are obstructions and obstacles in the way, and in the example you showed me, there was a fence along the line, there was also a hoarding. Obviously the quality of the cut was poor, but we're not doing any strimming, and we're also we haven't been able to use some of the the hand mowing machines that we would normally deploy, because we're solely reliant on the ride-on mowers. Actually, thankfully, we got some investment last year, as you may be aware, and so we purchased 3 new mowers with some additional funding that we'd been granted, and I have to say those new mowers have really saved the day for us in terms of us being able to maintain grass cutting throughout the borough, because they've been brand new machines, they've been very reliable. But I would agree with you, some of the cuts and some of the areas there've been issues in terms of some areas not being cut or us falling behind in terms of our programme. But I hope members will be sympathetic to the reasons behind that, and the fact that we've been operating a service under unprecedented conditions. I'd also add as well, just environmentally, we probably it's been a summer where the grass growth would be massive. We've had lots of sun, we've had lots of rain, so there are lots of issues, but COVID has been the main reason why we've had the impact on quality and frequency of cut.
To follow with the highway,
muted, Jerry.
Chair, I'll just address the final. Did you want to say something on highways, John?
Yeah, I mean, I can pick up some of the points on that.
So I'll just pick up a couple of points that Councillor made regarding home working and the lack of consultation and engagement with some of these schemes. I think that maybe takes care of the highways one. I mean, what I was going to say was that clearly that's not a position that we particularly enjoy either. That we would like to have much more time to consult with members and with members of the public. But as you can appreciate, a lot of the money that's been coming from government for various activities have been very short deadlines in terms of getting the schemes together, getting the bids in, getting the money spent. There's clearly an imperative within government to be seen to be not just allocating money, but also to be seen to be spending it in the area that they wish it to be spent. So it has meant that the officers actually are under a lot of pressure to come up with schemes probably quicker than we'd like to in some cases, and it does mean that the engagement process is normally shorter than we'd normally like. So we do take that on board. We do agree with it and sympathise with it, but we are in a position where we either don't apply for this money and let it go past us, or we accept it, and when we do apply for it, we're going to have to do it in a much more speedy manner than normally would be our way of doing things. On the home working front, we have about 230 people now working at home out of our 1,191 staff. So it's not as many as people would imagine, I suspect, and that's because, as you know from the presentation tonight, we have a lot of frontline staff that have been working solidly and not been anywhere near their home hardly, because they've been working a lot of hours to continue keep the services continuing. So there is a relatively reducing number of people working at home. most of the people who are at home are doing jobs in our planning team or economic development team and such like, where it's perfectly possible to work from home. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree that in some cases productivity will be improved because of that. It's something we want to continue with where we can. I'm not sure that there's going to be any savings in terms of property, in terms of our estate, for the simple reason that you know, we're not able to get the same number of people in our property. So in the town hall, for example, the capacity has been reduced significantly. So whether, you know, we're not getting to the point where we can do away with buildings because the social distancing requirement means that actually we need more space for less people. So maybe in a year or two's time down the road, we might be able to rationalise on the basis that people have continued to work at home. But for the moment, for the foreseeable future, I can't see any significant savings other than possibly in electricity and lighting, because clearly a lot of the systems are not, you know, the same level of demand as it would be if the offices were full. So you know, it's something we're looking at in terms of utilisation as part of our strategic asset management plan. We're looking at all our operational assets. We're looking at the utilisation rates that we're getting out of these properties, and we'll start to make some decisions as part of that strategic asset management plan about which assets we should be, you know, focusing on, and whether or not there's any surplus to requirements. But as I say, that's probably going to be at least a year, or maybe 15, 18 months away before we get to a point where we can start to see any real savings coming through. I think I've touched on everything. I'm not sure John needs to come back. I hope that we have answered all your questions, or at least addressed them all, if not answered them all.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on one part of the question, which was around the unemployment issues, and I think I did touch in my presentation that the workshop was actively continuing to work on a virtual basis, and liaising with the Jobs Centre and DWP to ensure that where there are active needs, that the workshop can support them on a remote basis. And I think as those needs expand and as additional people come forward, then we'll have to monitor that and try and ensure that we deliver as much support as possible to get those people back into business. The other side of the team is actively engaging with other businesses, and where there's an identified business that's going into administration, for example, then they'll work with that team to ensure that the whole of the economic team can support the business and support the people who might become unemployed. And I just wanted to also highlight the council's got an active adult education provision that's operated via Bolton College, and will be underway again in September on a remote basis. So if there are any people that want to change their jobs, want to do some additional training, then there are facilities available for them to retrain, and that will be operational again in September. Many thanks, Chair. Cheers.
I think, John, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, just one final brief comment, if I may, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Just one final comment from myself, and it just picks up on the point that Jerry had responded to around obviously new ways of working, and I think it was again just to offer reassurance to Councillor Wilkinson that one of the work streams which has come out of the recovery process, which I'm involved in, is very much around exploring opportunities to move to more virtual solutions, channel shift. We as part of the recovery process have undertaken a range or a series of business impact assessments, and that has enabled the team involved in recovery to identify where services. Kelly alluded to some examples earlier in relation to her particular part of the council's business, and we are looking to build on some of the adaptations that services have made and integrate them into a wider, as I say, channel shift type project. There is a specific work stream looking at that at this moment in time. So again, alongside opportunities to potentially rationalise buildings, and Jerry's obviously responded to that, there is most definitely a desire to coin a phrase which is well used within recovery circles at this moment in time, to build back better, and that is to take the opportunity to do things differently as we move forward. And certainly digital solutions, channel shift will be very much a key component of that recovery work, albeit that these things take time to work through, and as I say, it remains, as I say, a priority for the council moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Our next question is Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. I've had a couple of problems with the chat thing tonight, haven't we? Right. Okay, so just the 3 points really I wish to make. I think one's to Paul in regard to the regeneration. If I was hearing rightly, there's some reassurance there that the town centre funding is coming our way, particularly in Little Lever, because there is another place apart from Farnworth. I just thought I'd drop that in. In terms of the timescales and the COVID crisis, can you give some indication if there's been some slippage there, if we can meet some deadlines? So what I'm looking for really is reassurance that the money will be delivered, and secondly, that it will be done within a reasonable time frame. That's my first question. I'll do all three if I may, Chair, and then I can just let other people answer. The next one was around the bins and the recycling. I, like many other councils, I suppose, have had a lot of casework, in particular missed collections. And I understand, yeah, there's been shortages, staff shielding, etc. But what I'm finding is there's repeated missed collections in a particular area. So I was wondering from the exec member or from lead officer, has there been a change in operator, or is there a particular reason why this is happening repeatedly? Fair enough, I've rang up, I've complained, and people have addressed it, but I'm trying to get to the root cause of the problem. Have the routes been changed, etc.? And my final point was around the schools and school transport. There's a lot of mixed messages coming backwards and forwards from the government in terms of schools opening, it being deferred down to local authorities. I was just wondering from the transport section, do you have a plan B? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Do you want me to come off
camera?
Chair,
I'll probably start off on the first question.
I think the camera's got.
Sorry, Paul. Yeah, sorry, Chair. It was a bit delayed there, switching over to Paul.
Thanks, John. So yeah, just on the first question, I mean, it's really good to see that the demolition of the existing Tesco, so that the health centre and library can commence, is progressing, and I think there's some activity due this week or next week, some visible activity due this week or next week, which is really good news. That has taken, as members will appreciate, some time, and there's been some delays over COVID because we couldn't access the building to get the programme ready. In terms of the other funding, there's I think Little Lever was successful in having the master plan consultation events and engagement just prior to COVID. We've had further engagements on the master plan during COVID to try and work up which of the proposals and which of the schemes within the master plans can be brought forward as quickly as possible, and that work is ongoing. But you know, during COVID, we've had engagement across all 4 of the district centres with each of the chairs of those areas to make sure that progress is maintained, and any proposals that can come forward quickly are identified and to ensure that those can be delivered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, if I can maybe pick up on the points regarding social need, right? Thank you, Councillor. I think just 2 points. I'll start, if you don't mind, just with the social needs transport question, if I may. I think right now, I think as I alluded to in my presentation, we are working with schools. We are preparing routes for the beginning of the 2020-21 school year, and they will of course be determined by the area that pupils live in, and any bubbles, as is the phrase being used at this moment in time, that may be formulated from either a transport perspective or through the schools. I think probably where we are in terms of the scale of the operation is at present, we probably will be required to transport in the vicinity of 1,000 pupils. There are a number of variables and dependencies at this moment in time. We are working on the basis that schools will resume, but we also provide services, as I think I alluded to in the presentation, in respect of adult daycare provision. We're a little unsure yet in terms of when adult daycare provision will return to normal, and if that doesn't operate in accordance with the same timeline, then the reality is that we will likely have additional in-house fleet vehicles which we could utilise to transport pupils to school. However, we similarly have the ability to draw on a number of kind of private operators through framework agreements that we're in the process of establishing. Clearly there would be potentially a cost implication of doing so, but that would be something that we would love to develop and fine-tune if we found ourselves in that particular position. So of course one of the other options available to us is to have a dialogue with parents, particularly those with children or who have perhaps single occupancy transport arrangements in place, because it might be that offering those families a personal budget to incentivise them to transport their own child to school during the coming year actually might be a more attractive option. And we are mindful that some parents right now, because of the anxieties around COVID-19, may actually genuinely see that as a more appropriate way forward, certainly in the short to medium term. So would I call it Plan B? Perhaps not Plan B, but we are certainly reviewing a range of options should we find that we are not in a position to necessarily facilitate all of the transport requirements for a variety of reasons. So hopefully that gives you some sort of insight into the work that we are doing at present. In relation to the Miss Binns query, dare I say that might be an issue better addressed offline, but certainly in terms of fundamental redesign of our services, no, we haven't. We do adjust periodically our waste collection rounds. We have what we call route optimization software in place, which enables us to do that and to adjust rounds almost under the radar, if you wish. We can do some sort of sensitivity analysis just to see what the benefits or disbenefits would be of moving certain properties onto different collection rounds, but that would ordinarily be still on the same day of collection. There are many reasons, and I say this having been around waste collection services now for many years. I would certainly not suggest for a minute that sometimes our collection crews don't get it wrong, but equally we often find ourselves presented with challenges in relation to, if I can say, perhaps inconsiderate parking as an example, where waste collection teams make best efforts to provide a timely scheduled service, but because of parking arrangements in a particular area, they have great difficulty in safely manoeuvring the vehicle into a particular street, and that sometimes can play out over a period of weeks. So I'll probably pause there and perhaps suggest if you would be kind enough to make me aware of any specific concerns that you have offline, and we'll certainly explore them for you, both in terms of the root cause but also potential solutions moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Our next question is Councillor Ayo.
Thank you, Chair. I had a collection issue while Councillor Wilkinson was asking the question. My question to John Kelly or maybe John Dyson is regarding the cemeteries slide, which says recently we reviewed the number of mourners that can attend a funeral, 16 in East Chapel, 26 in West Chapel, and 30 at the graveside. My question is, have you got the numbers for mosque holding the funeral, as they are different in capacity and sizes? Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm actually. Forgive me. I didn't quite catch the question there. Was that numbers in relation to numbers in mosques? I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question. Yes. Forgive me.
Yes, John. That's the question. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. As far as I'm aware, and forgive me, I can certainly explore this offline, but the piece of work that we've undertaken recently was only in relation to the council facilities, the chapels at the Overdale crematorium. The extent of the work that we've done beyond that, I'm afraid, as I say, is not something that I believe falls within our remit, Councillor. So the work that we've done and the numbers that I referred to were purely in relation to the chapel facilities at Overdale crematorium.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our next questioner is Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on Councillor Peel's comment just regarding recycling. I do agree with Councillor Peel that it is unacceptable to have residents that refuse to recycle. And obviously the council does work with Recycle for GM regarding targeted campaigns, and at the moment one of those is actually composting at home, because obviously one of the cheapest ways to deal with waste is to not produce it in the first place. There are, as John alluded to, there is the resource and waste strategy, which is at a national level at the moment, which is looking at actually taxing the plastic producers at source and the manufacturers, and also introducing different streams of recycling. So there is quite an onus at the moment, especially within GM and the different authorities, to see where that leads, because that will also come with resources to implement the different streams that would need to be recycled. There are as well a number of kind of schemes that are in the process of being worked through as part of that, and one of those is a deposit and return scheme, which obviously will have an impact on our collections and our recycling rates as well. In terms as well of the Suez contract, part of that contract is to actually increase our recycling rates quite a lot, and also our diversion rates to recycling streams through the HWRCs and also the collections, so that they actually pick the waste line to increase the recycling that we can do. But obviously there is always work that can be done with residents in regarding to encouraging them to recycle, and to recycle properly and the correct things that can go into the correct bin. So I do welcome his comment, and I do agree with him as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Warren. No, I was a bit too quick before, and In answer to Councillor Ayob's question, Councillor Walsh wished to speak. So, Councillor Walsh, please go ahead. Thank you.
Just a very quick one, Chairman. As members may know, I've got a particular interest in this matter, and the guidelines as recently as yesterday, which have in front of me, is that it is 30 maximum in any one place of worship, irrespective of size. So capacity of a building is not an issue. It is 30 is the prescribed number for weddings and funerals.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Walsh. That brings us to the end of the questioning on this part of our agenda. So we move on to item 6, which is the committee works programme for 2021.
Thank you, Chairman. Members have had sight of last year's work programme. Previously, the committee remit and are shortly going to receive some information from the Director on possibilities for the forthcoming municipal year. The process is that following this meeting, the Chair, Vice, myself and officers will get together to discuss the formulation of a proposed work programme, which will come back to the next meeting on the 25th of August, on the Tuesday. That's when the next meeting is. And members after this meeting are asked to submit on email suggestions for the work programme to me, and the Chair will also mention about that in a second. Thanks very much.
Just before we move on to the next slide, Councillor McKeon, did you want to speak about this, or you want to speak now?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Chair. Yes, I was getting in quickly. I kind of assumed that we'd now have a discussion about items that we might discuss in the work programme, but it seems as if we're going to do that by email, so I withdraw my desire to speak, if that's the case.
Well, no problem. If you do wish to speak again, just let me know. Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
So I think it's to Mr. Brook now, if that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. These are some suggested topics that Scrutiny may wish to consider during the course of the year. A lot of them you will see are kind of recurring themes. Clearly, there's been a lot of discussion tonight about waste collection services. It's an area of interest for all councillors, and that would obviously be an area for more detailed scrutiny if you wished. Performance and householder engagement, tackling contamination and non-target material, for example, kind of part of the waste environmental agenda, but probably worthwhile of a separate consideration if you wished. And also waste and recycling policies, including fees and charges. Given that our time available in each meeting, it might be that you would want to try and bundle a couple of these together in one meeting, but we put them in as 3 separate services. Likewise, bereavement services. Again, we've had a good overview tonight of some of the issues around that, but we didn't get into issues around resourcing and time it takes to prepare burial graves and burial sites and so on, and also we mentioned things like streaming of services. So there's some interesting information that we could, or that members could derive if they wanted to, on terms of bereavement services. Strategic asset management strategy is something that I've said that it's coming through the works, but again, it's something that that members might want to have a specific scrutiny session on, to see exactly behind and delve behind some of the data and the numbers around our assets, the many assets that we have. I think over 1,700, and so there's probably quite a lot of questions we could ask about these. Business engagement and employment support, you heard from Councillor Wilkinson the concern around employment as unemployment levels start to rise. And so the whole area of what we do to support businesses and how we work with the growth company in Greater Manchester, for example, to provide a comprehensive service for businesses is something that you may wish to look at. Clearly, town centres and other major developments is a very big element of our work programme in place. It's a very sensitive issue. It's clearly very visible, and it's something that everybody is interested in. So that's an obvious area for scrutiny if you wish to do that. And in the last two areas, really, I felt it was useful to suggest that perhaps we would do a scrutiny session on enforcement activities across our directorate. Again, we've heard a lot tonight in different areas of our activities, but we have enforcement activities in many different areas: housing, planning, regulatory services, waste, highways. And so if you wanted to see what we do in terms of enforcement around these areas, then we could put on a kind of whole scrutiny session around enforcement activities, just to give you an insight into the processes involved in enforcement, the resources we've got available for it, and so on. And then lastly, mindful of the fact that that we have passed a motion as a council that there's a climate emergency, you might want to address some of the issues that some of the actions that we are taking to address climate change. These tend to be at different service levels. We've done quite a lot across the piece, but it tends to be disaggregated, and perhaps you might want to bring it together in one scrutiny session. So these are, from an officer point of view, our recommendations in some of the areas you might want to consider. I'll pass it back to you, Chair. I think, as you've said, you may want to have a small discussion with members now, or you may want to just leave it for email exchange. So back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, of course, those items listed on that spreadsheet page are just suggestions. If any member would like to scrutinise any other area, then please make the suggestions, send them in an email to Ian. Now, because of the turnaround on this is really tight, our next place scrutiny meeting is on the Tuesday, the 25th of August. So I would be very grateful if everyone could have their suggestions in by the end of Monday, the 10th of August. I know that's not giving you much time, but I know a lot of you would have already thought very hard on the sort of things you're interested in. Myself, the officers, and Councillor Weatherby will be meeting on the 13th of August to actually go through and put the work programme together. So I'll be very much grateful for your cooperation to get your suggestions in as early as possible. If anyone wants a quick word, then you're more than welcome to. Right, thank you. So I believe, let me just check. Yeah, I believe that's the end of the meeting. Can I thank everyone for attending, the officers and obviously the members, and thank you very much everyone for your questions and for the answers. It's very, very informative as always. Take care everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.